I changed my career because of a disaster. I graduated from economics. I was ready to fight the IMF and World Bank policies in Africa, especially the structural adjustment policies, and that was 1985. And guess what? A disaster happened in my region, Darfur, and that is a famous famine, which is a twin of the Ethiopian famine, where we lost almost 100,000 people out of the 3 million in Darfur. And that is why I came into this situation. So I was never, this is by coincidence, a disaster have changed that. When you talk about the theme, the leadership, I think there's a lot of conversation about, do we have a shortage of talent or a shortage of a problem of leadership? And I personally, I engaged since 1985, going especially Africa, Southeast Europe, Latin America. Those are the areas where, and the Middle East, those are the areas where I have a first-hand experience. And in these areas, I have met talented people in the displaced camps, in the refugees, in crisis, young people that are so talented. The crisis is that issue of leadership. So empowering those young people in terms of leading their destiny is critical into that. Now, when we come to the topic, when Prof. Alam contacted me, I saw that I need to talk about lessons learned rather than talking, because usually when we move forward, you need to reflect. You need to pause and reflect. And that reflection, many times, is not being touched or touched lightly to legitimize any exercise. And I think that is for me, is very important. In a chronic, the focus is here is about the governance, but in the chronic emergencies, look, if you took Somalia, it is in a chronic since 1991. If you took DRC, it's an emergency since when? If you took Sierra Leone until recently, Liberia, how long it took? If you go to each crisis, it has taken so long. And during this time, if you are, who's born here 1991? I mean, who's born after 1991 here? Anyone? So I have some people born after. You remember that there are people who are now, since that time, they are in crisis in Somalia. So conflict, they are born in a conflict and they are living in that conflict. And therefore, whenever you are trying to look at the issue, you need to look at it differently. So we have been asked to look at the governance. And when I looked at Sendai initiative, that always the governance is looked at within the initiatives. And I think they are very critical issues has to be addressed. You need to look at the governance within the disaster risk initiative, but you need to look at the governance in the context where the initiative is going to be implemented, and you need to look at the governance of responding to the crisis. And I think those three issues, once we look at them and try to find a correlation between them, then we will be able to look at the, to see how the Sendai initiative by 2030, that it is going to be realized and the world is going to celebrate, to have a much celebration about our achievements. This quote, I brought it, and this quote is 2011. And this quote will be related to the next slide. But this quote is from Aid for Africa. And the Sendai, you remember that the Disaster Risk Initiative started in 1989, and then the second initiative in 2005, and then the third initiative in 2015. Yeah? So those are the three sequences. This to have this to say the drought famines that allow an urgent relief efforts are not new to East Africa. The current drought, 2011, is a repetition of 2005. And is the third since 2005, but the discouraging repetition of disaster and emergency response can be successfully addressed. A drought does not have to become a famine, which is a disaster, not of nature, but of a lack of good governance and planning. And that is, I think, that is a very critical quote, but it is very sad for me because it was 20 years after the decade for disaster reduction. The first decade is 1990 to 1999, and then the second decade is starting from 2005 to 2015. And this is 2011, we are making that statement. Then the question, that is why I am asking question, are we learning? Then when you come here, then it comes to the governance. I felt that the governance is very much influenced by the international, the development and the evolution of international politics. And I try to look at this. This is combination of a Cold War and a transition from the Cold War. But when you look here, you will find that as long, and the governors are so weak at that time, so as long as you are our ally, do whatever you want. And that is, for example, if you take the famine in Sudan, it was predicted from 1983. The famine in Ethiopia, which she brought, we are the world, it is predicted in 1983. But why, when it killed millions, then after that start responding, because it depend on Russia was supporting Ethiopia, and the United States was supporting Sudan. So that is whatever you are like, you continue on that, and that is governance is continue that. The Southern governance coordination bodies, and this is very important, were more of a controller and a regulator rather than a facilitator. Because, and this is the difference. If you are a facilitator, you harness talent, you harness ideas, you integrate them, you bring them together, and you make a difference. And this is one of the challenges, and this is go all through when you go that. The emergency responses, a military approach, parachuting, bulldozering, at that era, because people will come with the planes, cowboys, big moustaches, and then they get into the operations. The UN General Assembly, they made this resolution, which is the biggest step. Malta Conference is the beginning of a new era from that, and that is also have brought a new governance system, which led to, we will see it in the next one. But also, it was a North and imposed-led agenda. The agenda was not homegrown. It was not coming from the southern part of the world. And then you move to the second era, and here there's a little bit of improvement in terms of evolution, whereby the governance system has been improved by the, you have the IDDR initiative started kicking off. The International Disaster Risk Initiative started kicking off. The Earth Summit is starting bringing that the natural disasters has to have a different perspectives. And then the sphere, the code of conduct, this is in 1994, after the Rwanda genocide, that has improved the governance because they brought 10 core code of conducts that makes people to think better. And most of some common things, you will find them in the disaster risk reduction. Southern governance coordination body, I mentioned that, you go all through. And then started, instead of emergency brush shooting, starting relief and linking relief and recovery, which 5 minutes, okay, which is linked to the, make the things more coherent in terms of response, and therefore you can see the integration of that. Then Northern-led agenda, I mentioned that. Then when you go to the post 9/11, this is a global village. You are not far away from me. The bird flu, the Ebola, the tsunami. So the tsunami, people go into tourism, made their savings, and suddenly hit the screen. And as David said also now, the terrorism is becoming that. So I think that is changing game. Then Paris Declaration improves the governance within the donors, because the donors are coming and imposing their agenda, and they said, no, you have to engage the recipient population. You have to engage the recipient government. That has improved the southern government that I have mentioned, that relief development continuum. And then, but here, in this era, the southern nations, they are now claiming their space. And the young people that are saying, we can make a difference in addressing the disasters, in addressing the emergency. And I think this historical thing, this historical thing we have to look at it in a perspective. Then I just tried to look at this. When you look at, I tried to look at prior to the 22nd of December, when we agreed, the UN General Assembly adopted the international. These are the disasters in Africa. But look at the sequence here, that the disasters after, from 1990 and onwards. The frequency of disaster, the diversity of disaster is becoming different. Now I just want to move very quickly to lessons learned here. Disaster become a trend in the world and exposed. So become a trend. So disaster, there's some people say, become unpredictable. Yes, become unpredictable. But we have been exposed to all types of it. We have been exposed to small scale, medium scale, large scale. We know them. So we should not be taken by surprise now. The issue that, and therefore, when you are not being taken by surprise, you should build it in your plan. The second thing is conflict, natural disaster, and outbreak. And this is David, he did me a favor in this point, because most of the people who talk about disaster risk reduction, they focus on natural disasters. But there are two pillars very important: epidemic, the outbreak of diseases, and look at the Ebola. Just please look at the Ebola. Sierra Leone and Liberia were in a conflict before. Imagine if Ebola happened during the conflict. What will happen to the world? We will be in a mess completely. So if you combine it with that, so this triangle of conflict, you need to look at it in terms of lessons. Recycle of lessons learned from disaster to disaster. And that is what really frustrates me. I have to say that. I read the lessons learned from the tsunami 2004, and the lessons learned from the earthquake of Haiti, and both of them, I responded to them. I responded to tsunami in Somalia, because it hit Somalia, and I responded to Haiti earthquake, and the same lessons learned there, the same solutions there. That has to be changed. If we were to put the disaster risk reduction, there must be a governance, there must be accountability that has to happen. Decentralization and devolution without power, we have to take into consideration that this is an issue. Southern National Earth Coordination Body, I mentioned that has to move to the facilitation. If we were to put disaster risk reduction into perspectives, trickle-down effect of national disaster risk reduction is not going to happen, it's questionable. Why? Because when you go to Target 5 is saying that we would like to increase the numbers of countries that have a national strategies in disaster risk reduction. Is good, but you need to think about that the capacity is not the lack of political will, but the capacity of this government is so limited, especially in the southern part of the world. It's so limited. And then we have to look at the issue of integration. Then look here, the lion's share of money of 16 billion. This is the appeal, just the UN appeal for 2015. 16.1 billion, the lion's share of it is going to Syria, South Sudan, Iraq, and Central Africa. Those are what? Conflict. They are not natural disaster, and they are not outbreak of diseases. And therefore, when you look also to want to realize the disaster risk reduction for 2030, you need to take this. This is going to be the trend. And if this is going to be the trend, will take me to the second point, which I said. The response to disaster does not need an evolution. It needs a revolution. Why it needs a revolution? Because if it's taking $16.1 billion and the lion's share going to only 4 countries, then we must, when we are doing the response for the disaster, we should take all the aspects of the disaster risk reduction 2030 into our response. And if we are doing it the conventional way right now, we will not be able to accomplish. And thank you very much for your listening.